Hello React Native developers, what is going on? Welcome to Can It Be Done in React Native. This week we try to get featured on the App Store. Hello guys, I hope you are well. William here, recording from beautiful Zurich, Switzerland. In today's episode, we are looking at the App Store App of the Day shared transition. If you have an iOS device, I'm sure you've seen this shared transition before. If not, let me show it to you. So we can scroll through a list of cards. And if I tap on a card, we have this beautiful shared transition. And then I can swipe down the card, maybe snap back to position, or if I swipe down enough, we will have a shared transition back to the scroll view. So incredibly delightful user experience. And I'm really excited about this example for 3 reasons. The first reason is that this is one of the most requested examples on the channel. So I received many requests and suggestions for episodes, which, by the way, thank you so much for sending me such great suggestions, and my email is available in the video description in case you want to send one. And this one is by far the one which has been the most requested. And it's actually also an example which has been done already in React Native. And I'm excited because I think we can contribute very elegant and very original implementation to this shared transition. So that's very exciting. The second reason I'm very excited about this example is that this is a shared transition and we haven't done much shared transition yet on the channel. And I think it's about time we become extremely proficient in doing shared transition in React Native, and hopefully such effects should become a commodity in our community. So I think hopefully that this example will be a step toward that, us being able to very easily build shared transitions. And the last reason I'm very excited about this example is that, again, it's like such a delightful puzzle to solve, because there is really a lot going on, because we have our tap that drives the animation, but then also the gesture that can drive the animation values, and we can, so some animation values are both driven by animations and also like by triggers. And also we can if, for instance, the card is still springing, but then I want to swipe back, there's a lot of things concurrent things potentially that we need to handle very gracefully. And these puzzles are always fun to solve because, maybe you start by building things a bit like in a non-generic way, right? And then you refine until you get to a user experience that has the same quality grade than what we have here on the Apple App Store. So again, an example that is really a lot of fun to build. So how would we do this in React Native? So I think when we tap on the card, we can there's a function in React Native that can allow us to measure the exact position and size of the card we tapped, and then we can display a modal. So this is going to be our modal here. But at the original state, because we know the position of the thumbnail, the modal will look actually like this, as if basically nothing happened. But we already display the modal, but we will the width and height of the modal and the position of the modal will be exactly the same than the thumbnail on the scroll view. So it will look like as nothing happened, and then we can animate all of these values. So position values and the width and height values of the card to grow, to spring. You see there's really like a spring effect actually on all values. There's some sort of bounce kind of. And yeah, so that would give us the first share transition. And then we need to implement some sort of a gesture to swipe down. So here we have two snap points, one which is at 0, so when it snaps back to position, or one, so there is a threshold, let's say 100 pixel, I'm not sure, we can play around with the value, where it snaps back to the share transition. So let's say there's two snap points, one at 0, snapping back to position, and then one to, let's say, 100 pixel, where it will essentially close the modal. And to close the modal, same thing, we spring the values back to these positions, so to the width, height of the thumbnail and position of the thumbnail. And once we're done springing the animation, we don't display the modal anymore, but of course, the user, because we sprung to the same value animations and the thumbnail, the user will not see that the modal has disappeared. And so that's how we implement the share transition. And then, so for each animation value, we need to associate a clock, but also some sort of state to know if we are springing the animation value to the modal, or springing back the animation value to the thumbnail. And this will allow us, for instance, if I do the gesture, but actually I could like go very fast, tap, swipe down, and the spring from the thumbnail to the modal didn't finish yet. I need to be able to gracefully cancel the clock, stop the clock, and then start the animation to spring back. And I think that should be it. But what do you guys think? Can it be done in React Native? Let's have a look. Before we get started, two things. First, if you like the show and you would like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee and I will give you access to the private GitHub repository where I tinker with all these examples. And I will also make sure to treat your requests in priority. And if you have a new React project coming up, I recommend you check out React Native Elements, Premium Starter Kit for React Native. It's 80% of what you need when starting a new React Native project, from all the boilerplate navigation and static analysis, as well as tons of beautiful UI components. This is what I use for every of my new React Native projects. You can test it on Android through Expo or by downloading the APK, or on iOS using TestFlight. So if you have a new project coming up, I recommend you check out React Native Elements. The link is in the description. All right, guys, let's get started. Here I created a project using Expo init. You can download, if you want to follow along with this example, you can download the boilerplate project in the video description. So I have some data for my apps, and when the component mounts, I preload the images from the thumbnails. Until then, I display the splash screen. Once I'm ready, I having the content of my app, which is essentially two things. So the scroll view that you see here with each thumbnail, so that's the app component. And then if the modal is open, so I can tap here, the modal is open, we show the modal. But as you could tell, there is no transition. And so in the state, I have the modal property, which tells me if the modal should be open or not. And so I have basically two method, open and close. So when we open, we store which app needs to be featured on the modal, as well as the position of the thumbnail to know from which values we need to transition. And if we close, we simply set modal to null. So if I go to the app component here, when we tap, so there's this method called start transition. We measure the width, length, and position of the container, and we pass it as parameter to the open method. So we can say, okay, this is the app we need to to display in the modal, and this is the position from which we need to transition. So that leads us to app modal, and app modal has essentially 3 layers that we can see here. So that's like the first layer, which is an empty white view. The second layer, which is the content component, which is simply this text. And the third layer is the app thumbnail, which is this part with the image. And so if we go back, because when we looked at the animation on the App Store was very fast. So let's have like a look like frame by frame to see how the animation looks like. So here you can see these 3 layers. So we have these 2 layers. So we have the app thumbnail layer, which is growing in width and height, and also and then we have the second layer below, which is so this here white card background, which is like this part you see here. And then after a while the third layer appears, so which is the text. So it's going to be this layer, and with the opacity that doesn't transition, it goes, so if I go frame by frame, it goes automatically from 0 to 1. So we know we need to animate here simply from 0 to 1. So I created these 3 layers in order to really reproduce the same animation effect. So another very interesting file we need is this spring.txt file. So for each animation value, I want to associate a clock, which we're going to use to spring, and 2 animation values, as sprung and as sprung back, that we're going to need to know if we need to not repeat, first of all, the spring value. So when we start, if as sprung is 0, then we can spring. But once we're done springing the animation value, we set this value to 1, so we know we don't have to spring again. And it also enables us, when we spring back, to check at this animation value, because if the original chart transition is not finished, we can gracefully cancel the clock and spring back. And then we use also sprung back animation value. So if one animation value has finished to spring, but the transition is not complete yet, we know that we don't need to repeat the animation. So this is my spring configuration. Here it's really I try to set some values so it feels like the App Store animation. Obviously, it can be fine-tuned. I also think the way the spring animation finishes is a bit too slow, I think, for my taste. And I know in previous example, I was able to configure it a little bit better, so I will do this. I mean, it's not that bad, but so this is my spring configuration, which we can tweak a little bit. And so here we have this create value function. So again, because we're going to pass a default value as parameter, and we are going to get this tuple that we need for each animation value. So the actual value, the clock, and as sprung and as sprung back. So if we look at the spring function, we set the value to the spring, and once the clock is finished, we set as sprung to 1, so we know that we need to not repeat the animation. And when we're springing back, we check if the first animation is finished. If it's not finished, we stop the clock and we interrupt the animation to finally spring back the animation. So this will enable us to really able to tap like crazy, and it's not gonna do anything weird, exactly like on the App Store app. So the first step, if we go to the app modal, is gonna be so you see this is the position with height and position of each card, I think. Yeah, exactly. So you have each card. Actually, I could remove factorize absolute here. So each card has an absolute positioning with the position. Here we set the width of the screen, height of the screen, top left 0, but we know that we need to start from the position of the thumbnail, which we measured, and then animate to these values. So this is what we're going to do. So we know that we need to create here at least 4 animation values, width, height, and X and Y. So let's do that. So let's create width. And so we're going to use the create value function, which I just introduced. So width is going to be, default value is going to be position width. So I just need to import create value from Spring. And same for height. And then we can create X and Y. So here I can assign the values. So we have width, it's called value, height value, X value, and Y value. So let's tap. So something is wrong here. I think I mixed up Y and X. Let's have a look. All right, so you see here the modal is open. We have the text that display, which is fine because we know we're gonna add some opacity to it. The card is at the exact same position, which is perfect. And then we have the white background, which is in between, which we don't see at the moment, which is also perfect. So I think we should just start to add some opacity to the text here, which is this layer here. So here opacity is 1, but we can create an animation value for that. Opacity, and we can look at, we can add a condition. So it's going to be 0 or 1. And we do opacity 1 if, so for instance, we can look at one of the values we animate. We could take width, because we know that we're going to animate from width to, oh, actually, which one should we take? We can take width. So if the width animation value is greater than, so it's going to be the width animation value is going to be greater than, I would subtract the width of the window to the position width divided by 2. So this is the delta of the animation. And so if we did more than 50%, so no, wait, yeah, if, so we subtract to the target value minus the original value divided by 2. That should give us the proper opacity. So I need to import a couple of things here. So cond greater than sub. So I tapped. Here you see nothing happened because the text is hidden. So now I think it's time to animate these animation values. So we're going to use animated code to do that. And we're going to create a block. And we're going to need the Spring function from our Spring module. And we have 4 animation values we need to animate. So we're going to Spring with, so from position width to the width of the screen, the height from the position height to the height of the screen. Oops, sorry, Spring. And X from position X to 0. And same for Y. Let's have a look. So here I tap. I am missing some imports. I need to import run Spring, not from animated, but from Redash. So React Native Redash is the NPM package where I put all the helper functions for reanimated that I use. So let's go back to the app modal. So here I tap, it springs nicely. We need to animate here but the opacity didn't work. So of the text, so greater than, so with value is greater than, it's with, so width of the window, not 8 of the window. All right, so that looks good. And now let's do the border radius. So the border radius is also, we're going to create an animation value for that as well. So create value, default is 8. And we're going to Spring border radius from 8 to 0. And probably in app thumbnail, now that this is an animation value, I need to use animated image. So I need to import reanimated, and that's okay. I am doing something wrong here. Yes, I know what it is. If I go back here, it's border radius dot value. All right, perfect. So now we need to add the swipe to close gesture. So I have already a boilerplate component for that. And so in the swipe to close, we have the blur view. So we know that the background is blurred when we scale down with the gesture, the modal. We pass the status bar, we set to a layer content. We pass the children as parameter. And so for the gesture, we're going to use interactable from Redash. Interactable is simply the component from the reanimated examples, which I packaged into Redash. And so I'm going to overlay the gesture on top of the children. So I'm going to just use interactable here. Style is an absolute fill. We need the snap points, which we know are like 0 and let's take 100 pixels. So the snap points, there are two snap points, one which is x equals 0. And the other is x equals, and though it's not x, it's y, sorry about that. We know that the gesture is vertical only. And we need to set the animation values which will be driven by the gesture. So I'm going to set animated value y, which is going to be so y, which we're going to pass as parameter. So I'm going to have y as, so I'm going to import animated. So we have y, which is type of value, and so we get it from the props. So I can create y. So I can, to not conflict here, I'm going to call it translation y. So it's a new value of 0. So we have y equals, and now, so the gesture is set. So now let's add some interpolations to the y animation value. So if I go back to swipe to close, we're going to add some scaling and translation. So let's do some scaling. So we are going to interpolate on the y value. So input range goes from 0 to 100, and output range go to any, again here we can like fine tune these values, but we're going to go from 1 to, let's say, 0.75. And we're going to extrapolate clamp. And we need to set the transformation. So here we're going to use animated view. So we have scale. All right, so now you see we have the blur view, the scale, the two snap points work properly. We now also need to animate the opacity of the blurred view, because right now it's like blurred as soon as you open the modal, which is not good. So we can add some opacity here. Which we can get as parameter also, and we're going to use the same animation value than for the opacity of the text. Oh, yeah, I think that's. Oh no, let's see. So opacity. I think here we can do something else. I mean, that would work too, but we're gonna set opacity to if the width so equals the width yeah. No, wait a second. I think it's better to. I'm gonna use Spring also. I'm not sure actually if I should, infer the value from one of the animation value or create its own animation value. I think I'm just gonna create its own animation value. So maybe this one I'm gonna call text opacity, because this one is a discrete opacity, and for opacity I'm gonna create a new value, opacity create value 0, and we're gonna, so it's opacity dot value, and we're gonna animate from 0 to 1. Let me check. We need to use animated view here, of course. All right, and that looks good. So now, when we reach this 100 pixel threshold, we need to snap back. So we can create, so if I go back to the app modal component, we can create another animation value, which is should close. And it should close if the y, so translation, y is equal or greater or equal than 100. And I know that here we need to round, because sometimes it's like 99.9 pixels. So we need to round translation y and greater or equal to 100 pixels. We know that we need to close. So we need to import these two. Now here we have a condition. So if it should close, we close. If not, we have the same statements. And here we're gonna use the spring back function to do so. So let me just actually copy these values, and we just do the opposite. So spring back, and here we just need to up. And yeah, it's from 0 to 8 and from 1 to 0. Let's have a look. All right. So now nothing happened. So is this translation is greater or equal? I mean, should remove here the condition. Let's try. Okay, swipe, and that looks good except for so the opacity of the text opacity with value. So spring back. So I actually think this is still not correct because it's should be sub of with so of sub of with no. So the delta is, sorry about that, is with minus position with divided by 2, and we need to add to the position with. Let's try. Or am I add what? Add divide. So add position with to the delta between Windows with and position with divided by 2. Am I missing? Yeah, parenthesis here. Okay, let's have a look. All right, so I tap, snap back, perfect. What's missing here is the scaling need to be also sprung back to 1. So how are we gonna do this? So we're gonna create an animation value for the scaling. So create value, default value is 1, and here we're gonna animate spring back scale from 0.75 to 1. We pass it as parameter of the swipe to close component. So here I have a scale, which is a spring value. Exactly. I can import it here and here. So we check if we are doing the spring back. We're going to use the S value. If not, we use the interpolation. And this condition is going to be, you can just import it here, is going to be and. So if the clock of scale is running and we are springing back, meaning the clock is running and as sprung is equal 1. So S as sprung equals 1. We use the springing value. Let's have a look. Tap, snap back, perfect. Yeah, perfect actually, because now here we sprung, the clock has stopped, so here we interpolated again, but what we need to know now is to close the modal. So what I should do here is actually check the clock of all these animation values. When they have stopped, I'm ready to close, but here maybe I can just check on scale. So if the clock equal clock running of scale equals 0, so the clock had stopped. I need to call back to the JavaScript side, so I'm gonna call the close function, which we receive as parameter of the component. So let's have a look. Oh, sorry about that. Where? Sorry. All right, snapping back and swiping down. Oh, we still have a flicker here. Try that again. So here we have as sprung equals 1 and clock running So maybe we can simply add here to the condition clock running. So let's see. Or the animation has finished, meaning as sprung back equals 1. So let's have a look. All right. So yeah, looks pretty good, right? We forgot one thing, which is to can you see it, guys? So we forgot when we tap, the thumbnail needs to disappear. So you see here in the background, we still have the thumbnail. So that actually looks a bit strange. So we need here in the app.txt create an animation value, which is going to contain the app ID that is currently open. And now we know that for this particular app ID, we need to not display the thumbnail when the modal is open. So let's create a new animation value called active app ID. So we assign a value of -1 when there is no the modal is closed. So here I need to import reanimated, and perfect. I'm not at the right place. Here it is, and this is why you should name your have naming conventions better than mine. So let's put it here. So I need to import reanimated. Okay, perfect. And so we need to create the animation value. Active app ID equals new value -1. When we close the tab, we set it to -1. And when we start, we set it active app ID set value to app ID. Up. And we're going to use this animation value to drive the opacity here of the app component. So I can pass it as parameter. So here, okay, I have active app ID, which is type of value, and we can use it here as an animated view. Up. And so we have opacity. It's a condition. Oops, sorry. So if active app ID equals app ID, then opacity 0. If not, it's 1. App ID, active app ID we get from the props. I need to import equal and condition. And now I think we should have something that looks pretty nice. Cannot find variable active app ID. Active app ID, sorry. All right. Okay, I tap, and this doesn't work anymore. I know why. Because I used animated view, so the reference now is an animated view, which means that here I need to use get node. All right, so I tap, springs back nicely. Here you go. I think it looks pretty smooth. What I really like about this example, you see that I can snap spring back before the first spring is finished, and everything is very smooth, exactly like on the App Store. So I think it looks pretty good. There's a couple of things here we would need to polish this example. First, if we go back here to the app modal, this condition here should be improved. I think we should check on all the clocks before closing. And you see here when the modal is open, the status bar is white. So when the modal is closed, the status bar is going to become black, and actually the safe area view is going to appear, which is actually same than on the App Store. But look, I'm going to swipe down, and please look how long it takes to for the status bar to become black. So this means that our spring function, so it looks like it's not moving anymore, but the spring function is active, and it's just that the oscillations are very, very small. And as far as I remember, and I search on Google, this we can configure to be much faster somehow. So this would be one of the layer of polish we can add to this example. And I think the last layer of polish we can add to this example, and certainly it's something we will do together on the channel, is when we tap. Here I'm using, where is it? I'm using a touchable without feedback, but what I should be using instead is, of course, a React Native gesture handler, because if I go back to the App Store, here you see when I tap, I could cancel. You see, you have some scaling, so I cancel the gesture, but still I have some scaling, which I think looks very nice, and that we should implement. Guys, I had a great time researching this episode and implementing it with you on the channel. I hope you enjoyed it as well. I'm looking forward to talk to you guys soon, and in the meantime, happy hacking.